The first film we're talking about this week is the Oscar darling, The Brutalist by Brady Corbet, the story of displaced immigrant Laszlo Toth as he travels across to America to start his new life. However, he is faced with the brutal reality of the true American dream and the immigrant experience. Now, this film is, well, what can you say about it? I think a term epic, the real term epic, not just it being very good or very powerful, but it's so all-encompassing. I had a great luxury of watching this on an IMAX screen, and the sound and the visuals, I was enraptured with it. I really was. Now, Reuben, there is so much that has to be said, that can be said, that will be said about this film. It is 3.5 hours long, so it definitely has a lot of content to talk about, but it deals with such deep and sensitive and all-encompassing topics that, where to begin? And so you have the
moment of connection with the other people around me. I was surprised by how full my screen was, given that it was the middle of the day on a work day. But I think that this is capturing the public imagination for a reason. And the reason is that it's an absolutely exceptional film. I thought thematically, it's absolutely mad that this is a piece of original art, because a bit like sometimes when you watch a film that's based on a brilliant book, you go, oh my goodness, like there are so many layers to this, there's so much complexity and nuance. But that's because it's been marinating as a book for 10 years, and then it's been taken to the screen, and all of this material and all of these topics have sort of developed in that time. And I just thought this was really, really profound. It has so much to say about living in diaspora, about the immigrant experience, about what it means to be American, what it means to be Jewish, the American dream. It's about art, it's about the purpose of art, because the character Laszlo Toth that Adrien Brody plays, through his architecture, through the buildings he creates, he sees himself as kind of influencing and shaping society. And I just couldn't really believe my eyes. I think it's pretty much flawless, honestly, and I don't say that lightly. It does a really, really, really remarkable job of telling a story which I think on paper perhaps looks a bit pretentious, a bit intimidating, but I found it completely the opposite of that. I was really swept up in the lives of these people. And I mean, listen, as you said, 10 Oscar nominations, and it's doing very, very well in the technical categories, and that's because it looks astonishing. It's one of the best looking films you'll see this year. It's one of the best scores you'll hear this year, and deservedly so. But honestly, I thought that it had such a beating heart. It had so much humanity within it, which, is contrasted with the kind of the horrors of war and trauma. I'm sort of gushing because I can't believe how good it was. I'm really looking forward to watching it again, because the second it ended, after 3.5 hours in the cinema, I wanted to just walk straight back in again and have another go, because it's really fantastic. It's such a rich text, and it somehow manages to be kind of really meta, and it's like commenting on the process of making a film. It's brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Are we 3 weeks into January and already I've seen three of the best films of the year? I think we might be. Tell me, do you share my enthusiasm, Jake?
Well, like you, I was intimidated by the runtime. 3.5 hours. I have filmmaker friends who say if it can't be told in 90 minutes, should it be told at all? Which I, to be honest, I think is a very valid point. That if you are ineffective at telling what you want to say in a restrictive time period, then can you really control something that's 3.5 hours? Because you need to keep people engaged for that long. You need to have a weight to a story that can really hold up that runtime. And I think this film fully earns it. Absolutely does. As I said, I got to watch on the big screen and with big speakers. And I think that for a music man and a film man myself, I thought the score just, it vibrated in my bones. And therefore I was already hooked from the overture, because it has an overture and then part one, part two, intermission, part two, and then an epilogue. It's structured very much like a grand epic opera. I think it's very operatic, and even in the performances, and to see them so in beautiful vista vision, which is a type of filmmaking that isn't used very often, but it just looked like the era. I had no problem with imagining these amazing actors who we've seen many times before as these parts. I thought Adrien Brody was exceptional. Absolutely exceptional. And he dominated the screen, and his performance and his presentation of this character wasn't, because of course he's played a character like this before, where he famously won his previous Oscar in The Pianist, a sufferer of oppression by the Nazis. But this on a slightly different case of escaping and running away to America. But I don't think it was rehashing anything. I thought it was very fresh. Like the emotional core, as you said, the beating heart of the film runs through it. Even though the main character is incredibly flawed, the love he feels for his family. Not only is Adrien Brody giving a absolutely world-class performance, we have Felicity Jones as his wife Elizabeth, and Guy Pearce as Harrison Lee Van Buren Sr., I think his entire name is. And their performances, they're reverent, they're very dominating, like no part to play. They don't, all of them fill the screen with just their affectations and just how layered their performances really are, just how detailed. Adrien Brody and his character becomes the architect for Guy Pearce, and so therefore he's contracted to build a new almost monument in the name of the family, and very much a capitalist antagonist of the film, but is also very layered in his own complexities. It's not as clear cut as you think.
Yeah.
He does verge on the side of real American evil in the face of immigration and immigrants who are coming in. But it is so interesting. You have to watch it. I find it quite hard to talk about this film because you'd have to write several essays because it is so detailed. I found that the first half, especially for me, was absolutely watertight. And when it got to the intermission, I was like, gosh, I'm so excited for the next part. I'm on the edge of my seat. And the second half is bleaker, less hopeful, I think, much bleaker in a way. And by the epilogue, I think sometimes it lost its way a little bit, but I think that might have just been my own experience of just experiencing the time. Of course, it tries to deal with a large portion of these characters' lives. By the end, I was in a state of, it's been so interesting to just see where they've gone and the darkness they've had to face. And so I was a little shocked by how it ended in a very interesting way that I think some people may be like, it's a jolt. You can appreciate it. It does jolt you awake at the end of if you're completely locked in, because it is an interesting way they choose to end it. But absolutely, the filmmaking was absolutely world class, absolutely so mature, and this guy hasn't really done that many films before. We were talking, me and Matthew, before we rolled the camera, our producer Matthew, and we said, I was sitting there throughout the whole thing believing it was a biopic. It must be someone's life, because these events, they happen to people, but no screenwriter would think to go this way or talk about this way. And it was spectacular, and I was so shocked to find out that it's somewhat inspired by people that existed in the world, but isn't everything in art inspired by something else? So I really was in awe. I think that's the best way to put it. In awe, and that beautiful music. I wanted to say, I desperately needed the bathroom by the time it came. But I wish I could have stayed, because the way they do the intermission, it's on this beautiful shot. I'm not going to spoil what it is, but it's on this beautiful shot, just holds on it. and then the music plays, and it's sort of like the composer's practicing playing the score. It doesn't take you out of it. If you sat all the way through the 15 minutes completely silent, you'd still be locked into the movie. I thought, well, that's a very mature decision. I'm gushing as well. I'm gushing. It's flowing out of me. It's not very structured, my thoughts, because I'm just like, well, let's go back and analyze every single scene. But Reuben, please continue.
But it's so exciting. Like, I agree. Like, I'm so excited about this film. And here's the thing. So I have a degree in art history, darling, don't you know? Very, very useful. And so I was watching this film also being like, wow, they've done a really, really good job of making me believe that he could be a real artist. Because I knew he was a kind of an amalgamated figure, you know, inspired by real historical people. But even I, you know, towards the end of the film, I was being like, wow, well, are we sure? But I think that the success of this film in many ways rests on you believing in the story of Laszlo and his family. And so much of that is tied up in the art, it is tied up in the buildings. And you use the word monument to describe some of the work that he does, which I think is a very good word. The work that he does is a brilliant representation of what the kind of the modernist, the brutalist style was in this time period. You know, he talks about the fact that he was educated at the Bauhaus school, where you have people like, you know, Walter Gropius creating artworks, which, and this is kind of where Toth's approach to his work comes from. You know, Gropius was all about buildings which were the perfect marriage of form and function. There is nothing extraneous. It is really, really utilitarian, but at the same time, it's beautiful. And it is a kind of coming together of all of the different aspects of a work of art. You know, Bauhaus was all about architecture working in harmony with textiles, with product design. And actually, in many ways, I think that this film has a very similar spirit because it brings together all of these different elements of filmmaking into one unbelievable and I think shockingly mature. That's a great thing to point out. Shockingly mature vision. It's really mad to me that Brady Corbet has only directed 3 films, and more shockingly perhaps, that the budget for this, which I would say feels completely off a scale with Oppenheimer, cost $11 million. So the word that you were struggling to find when you introduced this film, you're saying, I don't know what the word to use is. I think it might be a miracle. I cannot believe this film exists, especially not on the amount of money that it was made for.
11 million. You're joking.
11 million. And as you said, they shot on VistaVision. And usually shooting on film like wipes out your entire budget. I think 1% of this film's budget was spent on film and processing.
Wow. Well, I think you said again the idea of this mature vision. It is mature, uncompromising, and I believe that this film was destined for success from its marketing. I think one of the films we'll talk about later has the complete opposite effect in their marketing. But this film was completely everything from this trailer. It had the beauty that the film had in it. It didn't reveal too much. I know there was about 2 or 3 trailers, the very first scrolling sort of credits across abstract images, but it locks you in. And I think that's very brave to sort of say, yes, we're going to use elements of the score in this. We're not going to tell you exactly what it's about. You're not going to hear it. But I was locked in. I was like, wow, this film looks interesting. What's this? And I believe that it was carried on. I think the director, he must have spent years perfecting this. Absolutely. It is a magnum opus so early in this director's career. 3 films, 3rd film. It's incredible. But I'm inspired. I believe it tells such a mature story in a political climate that requires those stories to be told. I just love the angle, the framing of everything was just brilliant. Just how close up in the face, how claustrophobic it felt. And then when you saw these monoliths, these sentinels of buildings, you know, they're so vacant and so empty. And there's a beautiful sequence that takes place in a marble quarry, and just the sort of appreciation of rock and raw material and the beauty of concrete, as you said, Reuben, the idea of these materials being beautiful, even though they look ghastly and gray. But then there's a great line where Adrien Brody talks about how it's not gray or brown, it's beautiful blue. It was able as I often find the problem in music biopics, as I did with the Bob Dylan and Maria ones that I've seen recently for Cinema Spotlight, I find it's very difficult for a film to show us how an actual person appreciates the thing that they love. You know,
Yeah.
music is a very hard one that people somehow, it's hard to explain it. So you have to show it visually, but you cheat by using the audio way, and the human brain is often influenced by music. However, this film did an absolutely bang up job of being able to convinced me the beauty of architecture. You know, there's a great comment which is writing about music is like dancing about architecture, but this film is the dancing about architecture film. You have lots of beautiful movement, fluid movement. There is a lot of dance elements in the film that come in throughout, often used to demonstrate the emotion or the use of excessive drug use or something along those lines, as it is in many films. But it's just sort of the way how balletic the film is in its editing and its scoring, that you actually feel like, I adore these buildings. I understand it. I understand the beauty in stone and construction, and I'm shocked. I wish some people would take note that this film can do it about something that many people do not have an interest in, and other people should really take note and figure out how to really represent the human condition and emotion when it comes to love and adoration.
Yeah. And I think this is therefore, because of that, and because of, I think, the way that it is connecting to people emotionally, I just think that this absolutely is the film that Hollywood needs to look to. Like, this is surely going to be, top 3 films of the year, because it is extraordinary, but it's made on a tiny budget, and it is so, so creative. And in the era where we're so used to seeing $200 million spent on a bit of rubbish, this is so exciting. And I think this is the direction that Hollywood is going to go in, because the economic model that it's been relying on for the last decade has failed and has to change. So I'm so excited about The Brutalist. I'm so excited to see what Corbet does next, because what a mind. And I wish this film all the best with its 10 Oscar nominations, because it deserves them.
It's going to win. Locking it in now, it's going to win many. It will sweep, I think. There might be a few upsets, but I think it will sweep.